Yeah, so here goes. That's touch recording, and we are going live in 1, 2, 3. Hi guys, welcome to another live session. This is the fourth one in the series. For those who are listening, for context, we just turned one this year in March, and we are celebrating with a week-long series of live sessions with all our contributors from the past 1 year. So today we are here to talk about all things related to food and beverages because Madhura is also here. And So let me just quickly introduce you to the panel. We have with us Madhura. She is a lot of things. She's a poet, she's a writer, she's a coder, and she's written for Third Lane. In the past, we've talked to her about many different things, about all those aspects of her personality. And if you haven't seen that podcast, you should go to our YouTube page and check it out. But today we are here to talk about her very specific part of her, that is her love for food, and more importantly, her love for coffee. So she is an ardent lover of coffee and very passionate about food as well. So that's the capacity she is in. And she's also written about this love for coffee in our latest anniversary issue. So that's why she's here in the panel. Then we have Arzu. She is a home cook, a home chef, and she also runs something very charming called Under Pressure, which she's going to tell you about. So I'm not going to get into it. But she has written for us. She's written about her journey with spices and many different kinds of spices, and her journey with food in general for Third Lane. So that's Arzu for you. And lastly, we have Ishita Dee. Ishita Dee is a food anthropologist. Um, she has done some exemplary work on the sweet making in Bengal and the idea of sensory labor and a lot of very interesting things. She's written for us also on these topics. She teaches in South Asian University in Delhi, and yes, so we are really looking forward to hear a lot of her stories from the field and how food anthropology became a thing with her today on the podcast. So yeah, let's get started. Uh, we'll, I think, start with a quick round of introductions from the panelists themselves. Since this is a session about food, and Ishita Dee and Arzu, both of you have made food a very central part of your career. So I want to know how that came about, because that's something a little quote unquote offbeat in with respect to careers in how we look at it. So Ishita, why don't you go first? Tell us about how food anthropology came to be your career and how you got into this in the first place.
First and foremost, a very happy birthday to Third Lane and to all the editorial members who have been extremely patient with many late contributions, especially me, and who have to give us umpteen numbers of reminders. Uh, what drew me towards food anthropology is, of course, as a student of literature, like one loves to eat, and and food also became a very, very central. Uh, Food actually played a very, very central role in one of the papers that we were taught about in the discipline of sociology, which is social stratification. Everyone was talking about untouchability. Everybody was talking about, who should we eat with, rules of commensality. And I often wondered, sitting in those classes, particularly in sociology of India classes, social stratification, development, that much of it is about food security, all of that. And yet, why is it, we do not follow a single object and we study it in its entirety? So, and I got drawn into food anthropology thanks to a very interesting assignment. I was figuring out what to do in life, and and then I tried. There was this person called Michael Crondell who came down to Calcutta and who was researching for his book on sweets. And I was taking him around, and I kept on telling him that you just need you don't only need to write about sweet making, how we chana is made into rasgulla, but you need to write about the labor of sweet making. And I still remember Michael standing in front, and it was the time of Holi. And I was telling, mort is a speciality. This is dyeing, the labor of sweet making. There is a history of Moira, caste, labor form, gender. All of it was going on in that conversation. And I still remember, that's one of the most precious, academic archives that, Michael passed on after his research. Michael shared it with me, was a photograph and saying, I hope you continue your journey into interest of labor of sweet making. So that's how my journey into sweet making began, which still is at the intersection of labor and food studies. So yeah, I'll stop here.
Thanks, thank you. Yeah, that was actually really interesting, and of course, I knew some of it because I've read your pieces and I've talked to you at length. But yeah, that was mostly for our readers because it's an interesting journey. Arzu, why don't you tell us how becoming a home chef came to your mind and how you started Under Pressure? What is it all about?
So under pressure at the best is I don't know if you can hear me. Um, okay, so under pressure at the best is an experimental kitchen. Um, it it has a set menu, which is sort of a compilation of my favorite recipes from across India. But more than that, it's also a space which I use to learn more myself, right? And like the learning is not limited to just like how do you cook, what do you cook, when do you cook. It's more about like where is this coming from, why is this eaten in a particular time, and so all of those questions have what has led me there here.
So, how did you start Under Pressure? What was the inspiration for it?
Oh, so it's a very long story. Like it's somewhere in 2017, I started a small home kitchen. At that point, I had no idea about like how do you portion out, how do you manage your accounts when you're running a food business, stuff like that. And it's stuff that you don't really talk about when you're like unless you've gone to culinary school. And so that led to a round of, I'm not going to say mistakes, but an events which were more learnings. And I shut it down. And then I think somewhere around 2020, I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't do a corporate life which requires me to just be available all the time. And I'm not really having fun with it. So that's how I ended up. And some small ideas that have always been there is just what led to the evolution. And this started somewhere in the pandemic. So I'm going to say it's a pandemic baby of sorts.
Yes, we've seen a lot of those, haven't we, over the past 1 year? I mean, pandemic has given up, but yeah, we'll come to that later during the conversation. Let's just take Modhura's views on this about her role here. Modhura, as I've already introduced you to our audience, you are an ardent lover of coffee. Why don't you tell us in your own words, because you do that really well, about your love affair with coffee and how the city of Bangalore has played a role in it? How did it all start?
Hi, I would also like to start with a very happy birthday to Third Lane. And I'm glad I could be included in the first edition as well as the anniversary edition. And thank you to you for including me in this panel specifically, because this is the very first time I am speaking individually about coffee. And God knows I've eaten everybody's heads up, pun intended. Wow. Okay. So I've by just being like coffee, coffee, give me coffee, and my parents would wake up in the middle of the night because they are getting the fragrance from the kitchen, things like that. And same with my flatmate in Bangalore. But it is a really long drawn love affair. I started experimenting with coffee from my student days, and back then it was all about the excitement of it, the excitement of all the new things. And so, Spanish bonbon, the Vietnamese cafe suada, then how exactly do the Cubans make coffee? I wanted to know all about it. And it was more about, it was a childish pursuit, more to say, to reach for what I don't have, that we don't see these things around us all the time. So I'm going to do something new. It was the pursuit of the new things, and I was really limited by my lactose intolerance. So I had to do my own thing. I practiced with milkmaid. I tried to look for recipes which had a lot of cinnamon, which where I could substitute cream instead of milk. And then I discovered almond milk as a substitute, and so on. But I wanted to understand how different countries make coffee, and I maintained this whole Instagram story series about making a new brand of coffee every week or something like that. But like a very famous William Wordsworth poem, it goes like. When first I came among these hills, when like a roe I bounded over the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams wherever nature led. That was what I was doing in Kolkata during my student days with coffee. Then I moved to Bangalore. I had to be the big P word. I had to be practical because I couldn't go around. Who had the time? I was juggling the job, and I was living alone, and mostly balancing household chores and everything, and buying all the everything from grocery shops myself. So I started to settle in, and instead of bounding over the mountains, just started settling into the what I call the home of my coffee idea. And it was a simple cold brew, or a simple filter coffee black, which I wrote about in my essay. So the simplicity of coffee appealed to me, and that is, I mean, I would just make a black coffee. That's about it. But the love affair actually blossomed in Bangalore, even though there were more ingredients back in my Kolkata crazy student times. The simplicity of the coffee, prevailed in Bangalore. But what actually blossomed was the love affair of the routine. I would make it when it rained. I would go out into the roof and sit under the we had palm trees, heaving palm trees in the Bangalore breeze. I moved in when in the end of July, and it was peak monsoon romance with Bangalore. And the whole romance of sitting in a cafe, or going to buy beans from different outlets, or just even meeting someone and getting to see their reaction to my favorite brew. So my love affair with coffee in Bangalore grew as more of an experience rather than a recipe. And I can go on and on. I'm just trying to see if I can hold myself to check the time. But yeah, that's about it.
No, I get it. I mean, yeah, you've you've written extensively about, and you've talked to us about your tries with coffee in Bangalore. But yeah, I didn't know about the crazy student days, or the experimenting with various kinds of coffee. But that actually brings me to an interesting question. In all your experimentation, what's your favorite sort of brew of coffee or blend, or do you have anything special of
Yeah.
that sort?
Thanks for asking that, because I have had raised eyebrows every time I mentioned it. But there is a Portuguese recipe called mazagran. It's basically a coffee lemonade. So you make an iced lemonade, you make the black coffee, and you mix it all together. I had never heard of it until I found it somewhere, stumbled upon it on the internet. But that remains to be one of my craziest and most special things I've done with coffee.
That's nice. Speaking of discovering, let's come to Arzu. Arzu, you have written about, and also I think you work with a lot of different spices, most of which you've discovered on your journey through various encounters. So tell us about that. I mean, how did your interest in spices? What are the different spices that we don't really get to hear about, other than the usual jeera, dhania, all of that? The spices that you have discovered along the way, and why? I mean, what are the stories behind them? Tell us about some of them.
So a lot of them have just been asking my friends, in the sense that, what are you eating, and like like why does it look so simple, and what does it taste like? It's just a lot of questioning, right? Because there was also a point that you could not just go to your neighborhood restaurant or a restaurant in your area and be like, okay, you know what, I want to try this, and why does it have a particular taste? And that's when I started paying attention to things like when there would be a description of a dish, like it would either be on YouTube or on someone's Instagram, that hey, this has a slightly lemony taste, but when you look up the recipe, there's no lemon. So you would wonder, like, what makes it like that? And just a lot of questioning, and then you would end up coming across stuff like wild pepper, which has a citrus hint, which is used in Manipur. And the only thing that they know it as is wild pepper. And but it also has a very similar taste to a trifle from the Konkan coast. And then again, so there's a lot of questioning where it comes from and why is it so similar, and why are there certain common flavors, but you can get the same result from different things. So it's been like that. One of the most interesting discoveries for me was Jakhya from Uttarakhand, which looks like tea leaves but is not. And then there is also perla seeds, which is used in Manipur as well as Uttarakhandi food, which sort of are different places. If you look at it geographically, there's nothing in common. And this sort of ties back to the Japanese shiso leaf as well. Because it's the same parent plant in a way, and it's just a variation of it. So there's a lot of stuff that, and like how you can, and then this led me to the question how you can use maybe Indian ingredients to make foreign tasting stuff, or like the other way around. And that's sort of how I just got into it.
That's actually really cool. I mean, what is the so I essentially that's an aspect of fusion, right? When you're using Indian spices to recreate a taste that you would mostly associate with a foreign cuisine or a foreign dish. So tell us something like that. Like what have you made, or what have you experimented with, and how has it turned out? What is the spice that you used in?
So I've done a pasta with perilla seeds again. This was right after I got those seeds from Uttarakhand, and I wanted to see. So I did like a variation of aglio olio in a way, which is basically just infusing butter with the flavor and then adding some chili and garlic and just tossing the pasta in that. And it was a very strange flavor. It took some acquiring, but it was also very interesting. And similarly, you can use there's a there is a plant called sarsarapilla, or like it's very difficult to pronounce. So like they call it nanari in Kerala and anantmul in Maharashtra. It's sarsarapilla. I'm not going to try this. But yeah, so that has a very vanilla essence sort of flavor. So using the syrup of that in a cake or in a panna cotta, and that has been very interesting as well.
How can we sample these dishes is my primary question at this point, but you might want to actually tell us or figure out your shipping details, so that we can leave that for our audience as well later. But yeah. But yeah, actually, since Arzu actually left on a sweeter note, I will, of course, use this to segue into a question for Ishita Dee, who has primarily worked with sweet making. Ishita Dee, tell us about, because I was mostly fascinated by the sweet biographies that you have written. So, and I think almost we have a large Bengali audience, given that we are a bilingual magazine, a part of which is Bengali, and we are primarily based out of Kolkata. So I think most of our audience can relate to this, that the deeply personal attachment we have to Rasgulla, and to, of course, Talshash as well. And of course, how we feel about sharing that um, the origin of Rasgulla with possibly with Bihar. So, what did you find when you went into the histories of these sweets or the sweet making, and the very fact that we understand what a Rasgulla tastes like today or a Talshash tastes like today, whereas these particular sweets were actually very sort of unique particular artisan at one point in time, maybe. So how does that work, or how did that come about? Just if you can tell us shortly.
No, this is an interesting continuation with what Arzu was talking about spices, because nobody would expect that Italian food is at one point of time laden with spices. So Michael Crondall in this book writes about, the rise and fall of four cities. Actually, when a restaurant in Venice, tries to recreate that really spicy Italian food, nobody could identify. Similarly, the case of sweets, because similarly with the case of sweets, the way in which I think in the sweet biographies, I always crack this joke in academic seminars. It's only Bengalis who can really come up with a taxonomy called "kom mishti mishti," right? People go up to a sweet shop and they'll be like, "Can you give me kom mishti mishti," right? So, and I think one of the beautiful biography that leads us to a kom mishti mishti, which is not perceived as a kom mishti sweet, is Monohara, right? Famous in Jonai, Hooghly district, right, where you clearly see a beautiful technique of sugar being used as a preservation technique, right? So the Monohara coating is that of a sugar syrup, a thick layer of sugar syrup, and the story also goes like that. And I think in the audience are completely aware of the story when a ball of chana with very less sugar content was, it was kept, and then the zamindar returns and says, "Oh, tu amar more," right? And that's how Monohara is born. What is interesting in this particular, I think, biographies, particularly what I found, which was completely missing and which I always highlight, is the supply chain that is very integral to the sweet industry, right? So without quality chana, you cannot have a good mishti. Something which not we do not even think in common parlance, which I found out, was the making of shor, right? Shor is not only the soft layer of milk cream that we think about. It actually, it can be as crisp a disc, right? And it can be as crisp as a disc, and you can actually play flying disc. Of course, it can crumble, but it is that excellent technique of shawl making that we find still in Noida district, that particularly in Krishnanagar. And that's where I think one of the most treasured moments, or, like I stumbled upon, where clearly we see a very diverse range of, milk intermediate base. So Bengali sweets we always associate with chana, but there is also kheer, right? Kheer is a very, I mean, the thickened milk, doesn't has to be a distinction. The Bangla word kheer is thickened milk, right? So and with that, particularly this shore at one point of time used to actually come from quote unquote households who identified themselves as the Goala community. These were not even made in sweet shops. So sweet shops also survive on the labor of shiuli, right? I mean, the people who, like are really involved and completely invisibilized. Their labor is completely invisibilized in our nostalgia of, Gurer Shandesh, right? The gur is tapped by the shiuli. Then the shard maker. And for me, those biographies really became important, particularly in this journey. Also, I realized when I started with my fieldwork in Bangladesh, particularly, that there are these sociocultural perceptions about about how much we spend on mishti. We people from West Bengal, they really think we have a taste for sweets, right? But and I think I'll stop here. But that the way in which the amount of sweets that uh, that people in Bangladesh actually carry, particularly when they are visiting someone's house, is quite phenomenal. So the joke is, in Calcutta they count the number of, they actually do a counting of the number of heads and they take sweets, right? They're miser. And it is a joke, and someone was like, here you will find the pricing of the sweets is by weight, because we do not count the number of sweets. So the minimum you take is 3 kilos or 1 kilo, right? I mean, for me it was like I was still stuck in that time when I wanted 5 pieces of sweets or 6 pieces or 10 pieces, or 30. But depending again on the counting. And clearly it tells us, I think, there is a lot of also interesting othering that also goes on with sweet making. Yeah. So
Now that you have come back here, do you buy sweets by the weight?
I stay in Delhi, so where I think
Okay.
it's only in Calcutta where one still you can still get sweets per piece, whereas in many other parts of India sweets are sold by weight. Yeah, but yeah.
That's true. That's true. I mean, even okay. So I think I'm going to, because we touched upon the making of sweets and the labor and the dreary process that goes behind the product that we actually find. That actually, I think I'm going to take it back to Modhura, because you talked about coffee and your love for coffee. Yes, but I have also seen you cook. I mean, your Instagram stories, you try new recipes. You just talked about stumbling upon recipes. But also, I want to understand how you approach cooking as opposed to coffee when it's presented to you, because you are, from what I've seen of your work, and even when you're writing about food, it's like you're writing poetry. You are a romantic at heart, and I think you admit to that quite freely. So but what happens when it comes to cooking? Because regardless of how beautiful and how aesthetic the product looks, the final product, the process of cooking involves a lot of drudgery. So what is it? Does it take away from the romance of coffee, maybe, for you, or do you approach it with the same spirit?
Oh, I'll say that it. I mean, I love that every trial and every error. Why? Because there is no client at the end of it waiting for a report, and I'm not, my cooking is not running on a deadline. Yes, I mean, cooking in Bangalore, living alone, if I don't make dinner in time, I'll starve and have to go to sleep like that. But then still, even if something goes wrong, I have been found to readily eat it, even though that is not the healthiest thing you can expect someone to do, especially being the child of doctors. I mean, if I tell my parents the fiascos that I've still not thrown away but eaten them up, because it's a creation. It's my writerly instinct to consume every creation. So why will so yeah, I don't have any such I don't think about it or kitchen fiascos as in a negative light. Why? Because I'm a romantic, of course, and I am absolutely in love with the experience of it. So I think as much as I love food and everything that goes into it, my favorite ingredients will always be curiosity, excitement, discovery, and things like that. So I mean, I can't help but compare and contrast between the way living alone in Bangalore, my flatmate would cook, and the way I would cook. She was calm and composed and quiet, and the person that she is, she would cook all the stable, practical items. Even if we would be working from home, she would make it a point to get up, make rice, dal, vegetables, and have a full platter, a full proper Bengali platter to eat from. While me, I am as a character also, I am quite different from who she is, and that's why maybe that's why we it was so fun living together. Completely opposite. I would always be on my feet. Before the pandemic, I would hardly be home. I would just be buzzing around the city, and somehow I feel, looking back, that I would try to replicate all the movement, the motion, the gusts and breezes and noise of the city into the kitchen, even though it's not very practical. But somehow, cooking, just quickly cooking some pasta, some noodles, some sandwiches, experimenting being the buzzword here. I would just do anything that would look good and smell good. And sometimes it wouldn't even have a name, and I would be like, oh, did I invent something? Am I certified to write a cookbook now? And I mean, two experts in on this panel, they would, I mean, if they were my professors or something, they would throw me out of the class. But yes, it usually was more about the experience for me. My flatmate would find me sort of dancing and waltzing with music while in the kitchen, and she would come and say, are you even aware that there is a burning smell coming from here? And somehow that is how I discovered that smoked ham is actually really good. And I liked the accidents. I had to throw some of the burnt things away, so obviously it wasn't a full meal that put me to sleep. But yes, but of course, that being said, it was very necessary to settle into the practical things. With ample video call help from my mother, I made chicken curry. It was and enough for people. I couldn't just throw everything together and give you a mixture of things to eat, because that would have been fine for me. But suppose if I had to present to a group, if I were inviting somebody for dinner, and that's how I started thinking, like, you're no longer under 25, behave like you're 25 plus. I'm pushing into 27 now, but that was the motivation. So I could successfully make chicken curry. I made my first maj bhaja, and now I'm confident that I can do those things. I don't do them often enough, and someday I really know that I have to. But my guilty pleasures, I still keep slipping into the whole load everything with cheese, push them into the microwave, and something really delicious is going to come out. And things are good. Yeah, I mean, yesterday, first of all, I didn't know it would be juxtaposed so well with my life, this panel, I mean. So yesterday I made something called cinnamon apples with ham, and it was nice. I mean, everybody in the family liked it. And these are all very crazy recipes. I wouldn't see them as daily life kind of eating. I wish it were the way, but then again, who has the time? And I wouldn't even expect someone to make all this for me every single day. But yes, I'm definitely in love with the process. I'm in love with all the accidents. And maybe one day, if it's even possible to write a book on kitchen accidents, I hope I can cook something charming out of it. Let's see. This panel has given me the inspiration.
I'm sure you will. And I hope that, 3 years later, when you turn 30, you don't think that, okay, enough. Now I've turned 30, let me act like I'm 30 and give up on the experiments, because most of them seem to be a lot of fun. But actually, you said something interesting. The part that contributes most to your love of the process, and even the accidents, the embracing of the accidents that come with it, is the fact that there is no boss at the end, there is no client at the end waiting for a report for you. I am going to take Arzu's point of view on that, because there is most of the times a client waiting for her at the end of it. So how is it? What is it like for Arzu cooking under pressure, quote unquote?
Like, I could say that it's not that difficult, but there's also this thing where every order that I take, it has to be sort of like, okay, what is the level of spice that you want, or like, what do you intend to eat this with, right? Because if you're gonna have it with something like a roti or a paratha, then it has to be a little drier. If you're gonna have it with rice, it needs to have a gravy. And how do you balance that without diluting the flavor? And then also the fact that I have no chili tolerance, and most of my clients prefer chili. So it's like, it's a very tough balance for me. So there are often times when I'll be like, okay, you know what, I'm going to send you extra chili just in case. Just add this up, mix it up a little, and just wait for 5 minutes and then have it. So it's quite fun that way, because there's a lot of customization that you need to see, and you need to sort of remember that because you're cooking for someone else, you also need to take note of allergies, because that can be pretty dangerous as well. So there's a lot of things that I'm also learning on the way.
And what about timelines? Do you like have to deliver a lot of food in a very short timeline or things like that? How do you manage that?
So I have a process where I do 24 hours pre-order, just to make my life easier, because otherwise it would just be too, because a lot of food that I cook is slow cooked. So it's not something that you can, like quickly just toss up and send it via Swiggy or something. So it needs a bit of marination, it needs a bit of flavors to come through, and it takes pretty much like a few hours to cook a dish to the level that I'm known for. Like, I don't want to send out chewy meat, I don't want to send out overcooked meat. There's a very fine balance that has to be achieved. So it really helps to like sort of like know what my limitations are and work with them as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that was fun, but I actually wanted to bring in a different aspect of this, and I think I'll go back to Ishita Dee for this. Ishita Dee, part of the the perfect Bangali meal, the something that even Madhura was talking about how our flatmate would cook up a perfect Bengali meal. Um, we, of course, people stay who get to have home cooked food every day. We kind of take it for granted. I think it comes with an added dose of nostalgia that you also mentioned, some yearning for people who are outside Kolkata, and even more perhaps for people who are outside the country. So, I mean, Indian food, cooked food, even the simple dal bhat it comes laden with some extra meaning. And I think over the past few years, from what I've been reading, seeing, the idea of food, it's being increasingly linked with our sense of identity. We see different regional cuisines coming. I mean, we are coming into prominence. There are different restaurants, regional restaurants coming up in the in the larger metropolitan cities. We are getting a taste of these. So there's this idea of the that has to be put forth as well, and that's very much connected to food. So even I remember when you and I were talking about your piece for Third Lane, we talked briefly about how we experience food and how that's how that's interminably linked with how we remember that particular dish. Whether is this rasgulla good or is this sweet good is interminably linked with how we perceive and how our memory of that dish functions, and I think that's very much linked with the nostalgia related to food. So what do you think about this? How do you think our food has become, and I mean it has always been, but increasingly it has become a marker, not just a symbol, but also a marker for our cultural identity, especially in today's times. And do you think that's why there's been an increase in number of food bloggers, a huge increase in food writing over the years? What do you think of this?
Yeah, and also I think, like Madhura was saying, and I think it's a very, very important statement that she was making, that cooking is also about, independence, right? I mean, cooking is about independence, and one is, it's when you're far away from the home, that first taste of independence also get expressed in many forms. Food happens to be one of them, right? So many of us, and I will not I'll not hide the fact, many of our homes are guided by rules of commensality of different sorts, right? Of what is considered to be waste, what is considered to be leftover, what vegetables enter, what non-veg. I mean, even though Bengalis take pride in non-vegetarian food, there are certain meat we go and eat in the restaurants, but we don't end up cooking in our house. All of this exists, right? And I think within that space, it is, I think, when you grow up watching, and this is where I see the relevance of food writing, live shows like this, or much more discussions, when you end up seeing that, my food is also worthy of being spoken about, right? That is where, you also start taking pride in the food. There is this beautiful, and I mean, I can recall one of the interviews I did with Sahu Patole, the author of the very critically acclaimed, the almost, you can say, the first the first Dalit cookbook in Marathi. Sahu Patel has said something
Dalit
very,
cookbook,
very
right?
important, in that interview. He said, I do not want people to, people to cook these recipes, yes, but more to take into that this has been that, on one hand, there is an element of nostalgia associated with food, but not all food memories are associated also with nostalgia. Some memories of food are also associated with humiliation. So this, on one hand, there is this element of nostalgia, yes. On the other hand, there are also this other emotions that, are humiliation, or also other sorts of lived experience that we experience through food. I mean, jokingly, I often say in my class that, politics of vegetarianism is not, it's a very lived thing, because I, as like, it feels like, and I'm very happy you put me in this panel. Okay, I feel very old and very nice. Okay. No, why I'm telling this, because when Modura was telling certain things, I remembered, and particularly this was when we had just turned 19. We were searching for houses in Delhi, and this particular landlady, probable prospective landlady, let's put it this way. This prospective landlady said, "Ladke aur ande allowed nahi hai." Okay. Now, I never could find, I mean, of course, like that, very, like at 19, you're much more feisty. I was like, Auntie, what is the relation of ladke and ande? Huh? But I think it starts off somewhere, I think it was that maybe for me, just because I was protected in Calcutta, I did not come across a lived experience of that othering, right? I can laugh about it because at this ladke and ande, because at the end of the day, I found a house where, ande was allowed, even if ladke were not allowed. Right? I mean, you prioritize, food, all of that, right? But I think particularly when it comes to nostalgia cooking, it's very important. I think partition memories really tell us what do we carry forward, right? I mean, there are every sort of every household that got, like, there are like, like there is this artist group called Review, who works with Afghan refugee women in Delhi, and they run a kitchen called Khana Paros. Okay. And within that Khana Paros, every time, they serve manto as part of, food festivals, often I'm left wondering, are we eating the everyday food that they used to have, or are they selling what they know can be, that can, be a source of livelihood, because you make those conscious decisions. Just today I was having a conversation with a chef friend. She's like, I wonder why bhat and taltale machet jhol, this I have to say in Bangla, okay, why bhat and taltale machet jhol is not part of a restaurant menu. Why can't we just serve it just like that, without, making it fancy, just that. What it is around certain food that also gets categorized as home food, right? I mean, Arzu is doing such fantastic work, and I think this is one of the major challenges. I still remember I used to be the delivery girl for this chef friend, and often at times, when she ran a Bengali restaurant, like we used to get comments that, ये थोड़ा सा आप टोमेटो डाल देते ना बहुत अच्छा होता, and yeah, you of course, as a customer, you be polite, you don't say anything, but I think those but this is also part of their homes which get carried forward. But I think in today's time, sorry for taking so much of time, Priyanjana, and I think I will be upfront about this. It's also about what so upsets us is about other people's food habits that, we are becoming increasingly, insecure about our homes. What it is, this insecurity around our homes that our populist culture is displaying, I think that becomes, alarming. And it is to do with, and I think here what Madhura was talking about, smell really becomes important. Often at times in hostels, I don't know how many of you stayed in hostels. In hostels, many a times, there used to be like, oh, this smells bad, but people might not have tasted it, smelt it, but still they feel that it's bad, right? I think those discomforts, I think, starts really opening up when you move away from the comforts of your home. That even your home cooked meal can be smelly to someone else. Sorry.
That was amazing. And but I am going to actually, because I kept relating to you when you were talking about this. I remember similar things happening to me, and I think all of us have had similar experiences, more or less. When I moved to Bombay, and I was looking at flats in one of the more conservative areas. And so this person was actually, she was all set to rent a flat out to me, and all of it was almost set when she asked my name. And I mean, I had introduced myself as Priyanjana, which did not come across to her as a specifically Bengali name. But then while she was all noting things down, she asked me my full name, and I said Priyanjana Majumdar, and she just thought for a second and said, Bengali, matlab machli. So like matlab machli nahi, but yeah, and that was the end of my agreement. So I didn't get that. And but also when you were talking about how Chahu Patola's book, and I remember reading this, not similar maybe, but the history of not quite romantic history that has created some really interesting and amazing dishes that we are really quite proud of today. Even in Bengali culture, I remember reading this amazing article by Mayuk Sen, I think, on how most of the Bengali vegetarian dishes, because Bengal, I mean, no matter how much we pride ourselves on our non-vegetarian dishes, Bengali cuisine does have its very elaborate um, array of vegetarian dishes as well. So, and that is apparently the history of that is very much attributed to the Bengali widows and how little resources they had, and basically how they would be left at the end of the entire day to cater to their own food, cook for themselves with whatever was the leftovers. So they did not have much, and the idea was to basically, this is a little traumatic to even say it, but the idea was to not give them the entire resources, so that you can cook with leftovers, you can eat less, and you basically you wither away. But because okay, sati is not there anymore, but there's no point in your living either, because your husband is now gone. So eat less, don't eat too much, and if that's creating some malnutrition, that's okay. But then the Bengali, I mean, the counter that came out is, I mean, how they use these leftovers to create the most nutritious palette that they could find, which has given us a lot of interesting dishes like kanta chachari, which has essentially no fish. It's only the fish bones that are going into the making of this, or even khosha bhaja, which is made with the peels of the vegetables. So that, I mean, it just, it's really interesting. And when you were talking about the history, and sometimes it not being entirely about nostalgia, it just reminded me of this book. So yeah, but that was really interesting to hear. But I think we kind of have to start wrapping it up. So I'll go towards the last question. But before that, I want to actually take Madhura and Arzu's opinions on what Ishita Dee and I were talking about. Do you think that better represent? I mean, we have seen a lot of food shaming happening over the past few years in the country. So, do you think more representation of different kinds of food in pop culture, more films on niche foods, like say we had Akuni in 2020, although there's been a lot of controversy, I know about that, about the representation in that movie, but still we had it. So movies like that, do you think that can help with the um, sort of insecure atmosphere that we managed to find ourselves in today? Mundra and Arzu, I think Arzu, you can might want to go first.
I feel like a lot of it also has to do with the tolerance because there's no particular exposure. There's always sort of been like a not a physical boundary, but more like a mental boundary that like north, east, west, this is what the food is. And it's sort of just been like, you've stereotyped it that food is, they use stale food, they like, it's a lot like South Indian food is always a lot of coconut, North Indian food is just chapati. And like all of this has sort of been made into a racial slur as well, right? Like when you go from one region to another. And this is something that I have experienced quite a bit because I grew up in the north, but now I'm in Bangalore, which is sort of the south, and it's been a very interesting trajectory of things. And I think a larger part of it is also like, you know what, this is what it is. How can we experience it? And I think a great example of this would be something like a Delhi Heart. I grew up I grew up eating food from Delhi Heart in Delhi, and there was just everything was there, and it wasn't like no, you can't eat anything there, or like this thing. It wasn't tabooed in a way, and which I think created a great place that people can go and experience food from different places without traveling, and I believe something like that definitely helps.
Absolutely, yeah. Madhura?
Right. So I feel that I feel that writing about food, especially when you're trying to explore a culture, is important, is because it brings forward two very important things, right? That writing and food, both of which are can be needs to be enjoyed rather than theorized. I mean, you don't ask me that why did you enjoy that poem? Because I mean, telling somebody that food shaming somebody would seems to me as absurd as telling someone enjoying that poem. And that too happens. Poem shaming also happens, right? That suppose they certain kinds of poems that are popular now, if you and I mean everything has their own advantages and disadvantages and areas of criticism, right? But I feel like appreciation is appreciation, even though that kind of poetry may need certain introspection. If something really good does come out of that thing, or I really relate to those lines, then why won't I enjoy it? And that is where the whole idea of guilty pleasures come in. Same with food. I feel that where does this judgment come from? Because food, believe that the reason why we had so much conversations about the politics of food and how it is a symbol of class and cultures and race and so on. But in the end, if somebody who will always say, I know that because I mean, going from Kolkata to Bangalore, they people who have never really got into the whole South Indian cuisine had warned me that oh, everything is bitter over there. You won't like anything, and somehow I really got into the whole cuisine there. I in the office, people started referring to me as the girl who finishes off the canteen's rasam, because I used to, even if I wouldn't have time for lunch, I would take a glass, load it up with rasam and drink that. That's how much I loved rasam and so on. But that's the thing, like people who made that very rash judgment about the cuisine usually may not have had it. So had they really taken the time to eat it, they would have enjoyed it, and that basically bridges the whole gap between bridges the judgment gap. Do you enjoy it? If you do enjoy it, then why would you judge it? Same for that goes for enjoying any kind of art. That if you in that like if it's uh, giving you certain positive emotions, then life is too short to reject it on other accounts, right? So if you're combining all these art forms, if you're combining writing with food, I think that just brings together all the different areas of judgment that comes into writing, that comes into food, and somehow collectively battle the idea somebody may have about it. Even let's say if I'm writing about Bengali cuisine in English, I have had people ask me why that is. Bengali is your mother tongue. Why don't you just write some? So they would not read my piece because it's in English. But that's how it's there in each and every section of criticism. It's unfair, but only if people took the time to actually enjoy something that's meant to be enjoyed. I think it would be very easy to bridge that gap. And maybe that's the answer. We need more art lovers in the world.
Of course, and I'm not going to be the one to complain about that. But yeah, I think that's an interesting idea because I mean, I think for most people the rejection comes before the enjoyment because they wouldn't even try it. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's not like I have tried it, I've enjoyed it, and yet because of my bias, I will reject it. Sadly, the rejection comes even before that. So yeah, but the maybe the idea is to get more get more conversations going about different kinds of food and different kinds of cultures in effect to counter that, and maybe that's the only way we can do it. But so yeah, I think we'll just get very quickly to our last question. um, we have lived through almost 2 years of pandemic, so I cannot, and of course we all know what that food posts, food pictures, food blogs, everything have received just a huge bump in the pandemic years. Almost everyone turned into a chef during the pandemic, myself included. So although that was more out of necessity, but let's talk about how pandemic has affected your personal relationship with food, and let's take Arzu first, given that she started this under during the pandemic years.
I think it's exactly what you said. It was something that came out of a necessity, right? Because we're so used to like going out and experiencing different cuisines and just sort of like, okay, let's go out for pasta today. Let's go out for like maybe like a Spanish meal, or just like, let's go out for sandwiches today. And we've never really, no one had really, like, at least in my generation, no one had really thought that, like, that, or we can make all this at home. And like approached it in the sense that like a lot of this can actually be prepared in advance and kept, and you can make your life easier, because it's always been like, oh, I don't have this, so I need to go get this and I need to do all the preparation and then do it. It's always been sort of like a laborious task. And that was it, right? Like, necessity is what made people experiment, and we saw a lot of people getting into like feta hua coffee, which was basically what they call dalgona. And this is something we've eaten all, like, I remember drinking it in my childhood. Like in winters, that's what you would get. And just stuff like that. And it sort of just became like, okay, you know what? Like, I'm bored of eating the same dal chawal every day. What do I do now?
Yes, exactly. I think I went through the entire YouTube playlist of bong eats during the pandemic, and yeah. So, but yeah, let's hear what Madhura has to say on this.
The pandemic, I mean, I moved back from Bangalore, and I started spending more time with my big joint family. And I started getting closer with the elders more. Not that, I was, even though I am the baby of the house, it was, you know, I started relating to the. I don't know where I'm going with this sentence. And I don't know what I meant by that. But anyway, I started getting closer with the elders in the family, and it was just very natural to bond with them through food. And it had to be a very conscious effort, because they would make me they would push me out of the kitchen. They said, "You're the baby. Who asked you to cook?" But basically, I said, "No, I want to be a part of what you're doing." So I started. Helping them out more, and started getting into the serious recipes this time. No more smoked ham on accident, and so on. But I made things. I started making things like ghugni and chicken. Of course, I mean a whole array of chicken recipes. We have chicken recipes named after different members of the family based on how they prepared it. So there's chicken by dad, there's chicken by grandma, there's chicken by mother, and I maybe one day I'll have one that is signature to me. And yeah, so I mean, cooking and getting into the whole practice of it helped me helped my patience blossom, sort of made me rooted. And it was actually a really meditative practice as well. Instead of work from home, even shot up the work stress, right? So it was very, and I mean, sitting with my family and talking about it would somehow not really help matters, but doing something like cooking with them, or at least helping them out in the kitchen, it was a much more you know a better approach at achieving peace, is what I would say. And they agreed, and now my mom is my biggest cheerleader when it comes to me taking up the meals of the house. And yeah, it just made me a more practical chef, is what I'll say. I'm getting into cooking the more serious recipes, things you can actually serve at a potluck. I mean, I would readily serve the my experiments in the potluck, and you will like it, I'm sure about it. But you would also be but if I served things like the chicken and the fish and the ghugni and stuff, you would be impressed. That's the difference, and I'm shooting towards that. And that's the what the pandemic really instilled in me, to be matured in many different in various senses of the word.
Yeah, that's
God, this is really in a public forum, and I was thinking that if I could edit actually how my relationship with food changed, of course, the first lockdown, and I stayed. I mean, the both the phases of lockdowns, I stayed all by myself, and there were many days. Of course, the initial lockdown, the first phase of lockdown, when we just, I mean, our universities, those of us who were in the educational institutions, the we the it was we just anticipated, we thought it would be a 15-day break. When I still remember the CM announced that the schools and colleges have to be shut down for 15 days, we really thought after 15 days it's going to be over. So that first 15 days there was a euphoria of cooking. I mean, I had moved to a new house, so I really did, I mean, I organized my kitchen, etc., all of that. But I think the struggle began with working with minimal spices, and not and I think there was a way in which, of course, let's put it this way, and I think all of us, I think, did that. I mean, we may say it or we may not say it. Even we were trying to come up with our own hacks to make our meal taste good for ourselves, right? So of course, one thing I mastered, I can say it with pride, and if there's a third lane potluck, I can get it. It's kachi biryani, and yeah. That. The second thing, my relationship with food underwent a change in the second and third phase when there were Zomato's. Let's put it this way. I think by then I knew I had explored all the restaurants, on Zomato. So and really the food I wouldn't eat at all, on otherwise, because food became a way to find a meaning. And I agree with Arzu. I think I never thought I missed the coffee shop so much. I mean, yeah, yeah. So.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's a very good note to sort of end the podcast on, the idea of a third lane potluck. I am going to hold you to that, Ishita Dee. And especially today's panelists, I think all of you are just consider yourselves invited to this potluck whenever we manage to organize it. Okay, and guys, just whoever is listening, tell us if you want us to have this potluck, and tell us what dishes you want Arzu to prepare. I think Ishita Dees is already set, and we all know what Modhura is bringing to the table. So yeah, it's Arzu who needs to you need to figure out. So yeah. Okay, but this has been great. This has been really fun. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining. We are past our 1 hour mark, so I think it's time to say goodbye. Thanks again for writing for Third Lane, for being a part of this, for being a part of our 1 year celebration, and it has been a great conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this. This was great.